Have you ever been reading the Bible and wondered about the purpose of what it is that you're reading? You know, there's certain passages that we read and they feel really applicable to us. Passages about love or about mercy or grace. Those are passages that we can read and we can say, oh yeah, I see how that relates to my life. But one of the passages that's really difficult in this regard, and maybe you've never even read it, maybe because of this, is the whole section of the law. The law is often called the Torah, that's the Hebrew term for it, and that covers the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And these books, they have some stories in them, and the stories, they're easy to relate to, but you also get passages that are a lot more obscure. And so these passages often tend to be ones that we just skip and we don't think about. Let me give you an example. Leviticus chapter 1, verses 5 and 6 goes like this. And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood round about upon the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into his pieces. Now, what's that all about? You know, you read through the Bible and you know the Bible's supposed to change your life, but what do you do when you're reading a section that's all about a bull and how the priest is supposed to kill the bull? What does that mean? What kind of impact at all does that have? And as you read through the law, a lot of the different commandments given to the Israelites, it's easy to just feel like, what does this mean? What's the point of it? Especially today, as Christians, trying to understand how commands that we don't follow, how they relate to us. So what's the purpose of the law? In Deuteronomy chapter 1, we have an explanation. Deuteronomy 1 tells us this. It says, on this side Jordan, in the land of Moab, began Moses to declare this law, saying. Now the word declare is the Hebrew word ba'ar. And it doesn't really mean to declare. It means something a little deeper. It means to explain. In other words, Moses had given all these laws in the book of Exodus, in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Numbers. And when we get to Deuteronomy, he stops and he says to the people, now I'm going to explain to you what these all mean. So this is our chance. If we want to understand the purpose of the law, we need to take a look at Deuteronomy. So, what do we see when we go through the book of Deuteronomy? Well, in that book, there appear to be 2 main themes to the law. And it might be a little bit surprising, because in fact, those are the themes that are easy for us to relate to. Consider this. The first theme is actually love. Listen to these words. Here's what Deuteronomy chapter 4 says to us about love. Out of heaven he made thee, that's the Israelites, to hear his voice, that he might instruct thee. And upon earth he showed thee his great fire, and thou heardest his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved thy fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them, and brought thee out in his sight with his mighty power out of Egypt, to drive out nations from before thee, greater and mightier than thou art, to bring thee in, to give thee their land for an inheritance, as it is this day. So Deuteronomy emphasizes that God did all these things, and he gave all these laws to the Israelites to show them that he loved them. Now, I think for a lot of people, when they read through, like what we read in Leviticus, about slaughtering the bull, and here's how you offer the offerings, they don't think about love. And yet God says, when you read that, remember my love for you. In fact, he says again, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 5, it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. So what you get when you come to the book of Deuteronomy is not only God expressing his love to the Israelites, but him then saying, and now your command, the law that you're given, is a law to love me. So the law revolves around this idea of love. But it's not just love. It's not only that. But that love then prompts another emotion. And that emotion is joy. I think that that's fantastic, that this is what God is attempting to teach his people through all these laws, these things that seem so obscure, yet he's actually teaching them to be loving and joyful. And therefore, If you were to go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, you would see him giving the laws about the offerings. And yet what he says over and over and over in Deuteronomy 12 is, when you offer that offering, do it in joy. When you offer that offering, do it in joy. He says it 3 times in the chapter. Then at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, you get what's called the blessings and the cursings. Half of Israel stands on one mountain and talks about what will happen if they follow the law, all the blessings that they'll get. The other half of Israel stands on another mountain and talks about what will happen if they don't follow the law, all the curses. And God caps off this whole discussion, this back and forth between these two sides of Israel, reminding each other about the blessings and the cursings. He caps it off by saying, all these curses will come upon you because you didn't serve the Lord your God with joy. In other words, the idea behind the law was to teach love and to teach joy. What God was doing is what God has always been doing. God has always, from the beginning of time, sought to create a family that had characteristics that showed the family resemblance. He wants to make a family that lives and thinks as he does, that shows that love, that shows that joy. And so we even see that in the law. Even though the law might feel obscure, as you read it, just recognize that's the idea. Now there's a little more to it, but that comes later. Because in fact, as we'll see, the law was also intended not just to teach love and not just to teach joy, but to also bring us to the Lord Jesus.